Welcome back to the show. Today's topic concerns one of the most consequential shifts in money in modern history, bigger than de-dollarization and as impactful as the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement. We're talking about CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, and the role that precious metals may play in the future. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you've had a cup of coffee because this topic can be a little heavy. I want to preface this conversation with a disclaimer that's too big to talk about in one sitting. So we're going to have a few different videos covering this topic and related topics so you can see how it all ties together. Precious metals are the best solution to the problems that CBDCs pose, but first we need to define CBDCs and the challenges they're bringing so everyone is on the same page. Central bank digital currencies are exactly what they sound like. It's a digital currency, not backed by anything physical, uses blockchain technology like Bitcoin, and is completely controlled by central banks. Another way to describe this, it's government crypto. Instead of being managed in a decentralized fashion as other cryptocurrencies are, CBDCs are managed centrally by central banks. Now, if you're in the US, the central bank here is the Federal Reserve, aka the Fed. And if you go further up the chain, there is the Bank of International Settlements, also known as the BIS. The BIS is the Bank of Central Banks. You may recognize the Fed as the regulatory body that has been increasing interest rates in a bid to combat inflation. And you may have heard there are two types of CBDCs. One is wholesale and one is retail. Wholesale is a CBDC meant for trade between banks, while retail is for people like you and me to transact with. People downplaying CBDC impact point to wholesale and say, hey, it's just the banks trading with each other. But the BIS has made it very clear they are interested in global adoption of retail CBDCs. So that's what we're going to focus on. On the front page of their website is a handbook for something called the Polaris Project, which is a white paper for making CBDCs work offline. Per the BIS, CBDC systems, like all digital payment systems, must work for everyone in society whenever and wherever individuals and businesses need them. This is solely for retail CBDCs. So, there is definitely a push occurring at the very highest levels of our financial system to create and adopt CBDCs. Here's the problem. We already have digital payments. It's called credit and debit cards. You swipe a card, a payment happens electronically, safely, and instantaneously. So what problem is a CBDC solving that our existing digital payment systems don't already do? Well, it's not solving a problem for you or me. It's stripping out privacy and giving control of our financial institutions to centralized governments and creating even more problems along the way. Let me give you an example. In China, the digital yuan has an expiration date. That's right, the money has to spend. You cannot save it because it disappears if you don't use it. You might say, well, Brett, that's China and they're dystopian. Okay, well, here's a quote from the Bank of Canada in a white paper on the exact same subject. This paper considers introducing an expiry date for online digital currency balances to automate personal loss recovery. We show that this functionality could substantially increase consumer demand for digital cash, with the time to expiration playing an important role. I've read this paper and it's awful. It explains how CBDCs introduce problems that don't currently exist with a cash system to justify adding a feature that is detrimental to the population and that doesn't actually solve the new problem they've created with the CBDC. And this is Canada. So what if the government decided they didn't want you to spend your CBDC money on certain goods or services? Well, every retailer has a NAICS code. NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification System. Every retailer has a 5-digit ID number that corresponds with their industry. One concern might be the government uses this to curtail Second Amendment rights by blocking your ability to transact with certain retailers. or they could use it to stop payments to certain clinics to prevent people from receiving certain procedures. Take any hot-button political issue today and imagine if politicians had control of your bank account and could use it to achieve their goals. This has basically already happened in Canada. When truckers were protesting vaccine mandates and blockading roads in Canada, their prime minister froze the bank accounts of everyone linked to the protests. Hundreds of accounts were frozen. Had those been CBDCs, that whole process would have been much faster and easier for the Canadian government. They had a somewhat cumbersome process to follow because they had to execute this through existing legal and financial systems that gives more privacy and control to civilians. So there's a huge loss of privacy and control that comes with retail CBDCs, and it gives unprecedented power to governments. And if governments want to adopt their CBDC, it's not that hard. You just limit the supply of other money. And this is where silver and gold come in. Primary wealth in the form of precious metals is not going away. In part because the central banks are themselves massive buyers of gold. They intend to keep it around as part of the new system they're building. And many of the wealthy elites in the world have significant amounts of capital locked up in metals. If central banks were planning to kill gold's utility, they would not be buying it in record amounts. Silver will not expire. Gold will also not expire. Your holdings are not in a registry. If you have some money locked up in gold and silver, you will be insulated from the effects of a CBDC. It will continue to exist as a store of wealth, as a means of barter, and as a mode of exchange for local currencies. That's the way you personally benefit from holding physical gold and silver. It is fantastic insurance in a scenario where retail CBDCs become the dominant currency. But gold and silver have an even bigger role to play in combating overreach. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution grants states the unique ability to create currency backed by gold or silver only. The phrasing is, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. And some of our state-level representatives have already begun to make moves towards this in response to CBDCs. March 30th of this year, 2023, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signed into law a measure that allows the state treasurer to invest funds in physical gold and silver. Listen to this quote from Representative Wholesale. Gold and silver have been real currency for the past 5,000 years. Passing HB 1479 not only provides a hedge for the state, but gives us varied options while facing a shrinking dollar and the threat of CBDCs. Several other states are following suit, citing CBDCs and inflation as concerns, and are working to eliminate barriers and expenses associated with purchasing and holding gold and silver. Missouri, for example, is attempting to eliminate all sales and capital gains taxes on gold and silver, legalize it as currency, and require the state to accept it as payment, and require the state to hold at least 1% of its funds in gold and silver. Now, for the speculators watching this video, I don't need to tell you what more government purchasing of metals is going to do to supply and demand fundamentals. In our next videos, we're going to talk more about the states that are making moves towards legalizing gold and silver as currency, and we're going to cover a unique gold product that is currently used as a local currency, and it's growing in popularity for its utility. That's all we have for you today. Please remember to like, subscribe, or share with a friend. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.